Thank you both for being here tonight. I'll start with just an overall question for you. As I was watching your film, it reminded me of several different genres of film. In some ways, it reminded me of an essay film, a compilation film, a memoir film, or diary film. It's also kind of a journal, a viewing journal. I'm wondering if you had a sense of the type of film that you were making as this was happening, because it seems to me to suggest many categories without strictly falling into any one of them.
Answering I had no idea of what I was doing would be totally untrue.
Sure.
But then the film came from necessity. And yeah, I just felt the need to tell what was happening, and I didn't want to ask myself the question what it was, if I was doing found footage or a documentary. And I think it's not a question for the person doing the movie.
Yep.
It's a question for the person receiving it. So we started from the images with Thomas, and I knew I wanted to talk about that spell of time, those last 6 months. I didn't actually write a diary, a day-by-day diary at the time. So at some point I decided it would be more of a retrospective chronicle than a diary. Because where I speak from is now. Looking back at what happened. But then I wanted to convey the feeling of the day by day experience of, well, whatever you've seen. Pain.
Yeah. So you said you started with the images. That means that you selected the clips before the text? You wrote the text?
As I told, I knew I wanted to speak about those 6 last months, and I'm not keeping a personal diary, but I'm listing the movies I see. So I just went through my papers and listed the 450 whatever movies I saw at that time. And I took out all experimental movies, animation movies.
Okay.
Things that I thought would be too close to what I was trying to do.
Right.
So I went through the list of these 458 movies, and I took them again one by one, watched them again, and took out the shots that I was interested in, or that was kind of that were remaining in my spirit, and we put them aside, and that was like 60. How many hours?
Like 40 hours or 50 hours?
And that took a long time. But we had worked before on short films that were found footage films.
Right.
And we have a kind of way to function. So what we usually do is we take them out and we put them into categories.
Right.
Film, sometimes it's themes, or sometimes it's abstract categories. Sometimes it's really concrete categories, like sex, violence, pain, animals, whatever. And we try to create an index of what we can use. And that took us like 6 months, I think.
Like 3 or 4 months. Yeah.
And after that came the time to write. But I had to know, and I think we both had to know what the corpus of images was, to know what I would write.
Okay, right. So I guess I'd like you to hear you talk about both the images and then the text, but there seem to be certain principles at work in the selection of the images. I mean, you said you selected parts of the film that remained with you, but there's also a decision to avoid faces for the most part, or at least known faces or identifying characteristics. I mean, looking at the list of citations at the end, I realized that I've seen a lot of these films, but I did not recognize them because of precisely because of the way you've excerpted them by focusing on details or objects or gestures or parts of bodies, as opposed to scenes that people might that might define the film for people. That seems to be one thing, that strikes me in terms of this principle of selection. So I'm wondering if there were other principles that you had in mind as you rewatched these 400 plus films.
Well, we have what I might call rules of the game. I don't think the point in using a close-up of known actors for me is disturbing, and it relates the whole thing to the industry of cinema. Because once you've taken an actor out of a picture, you've taken millions out of the picture. And it's also a question of sensibility. I'm really moved by these very short shots where the director is just filming a hand picking up a handkerchief or whatever. And I think that most of the time when I see and rewatch these movies, it's not the kind of shot you really keep in mind.
Right.
But they're there for a reason. And maybe it's something I share with. I recently had a long discussion with someone like Matthias Müller. And I knew it and I forgot it. That I think we have the same sensibility towards that kind of shot. The gestures and people being shot from the back, not being recognizable. And I think there's a real poetry in those lost shots. There are two really, really, really small shots of Mad Max in the movie. There's no Richard Gere in it. Mel Gibson in it, sorry. Yeah, it's the shots that when I go to bed and go to sleep, that remains in my mind. It's the doll being shot and not Mel Gibson. Right. That's the way I'm made.
So tell me about writing the text, and I guess it's a very musical narration. It has a very particular rhythm, and I'm wondering if there were, it's a very literary film as well, besides being very cinematic. And I'm wondering if there were particular models, particular voices, writers that you had in mind.
Yes. Concerning the autobiographical side of the project, and the way to make things come back from the past, and I have a real admiration for a French writer called Annie Arnaud.
Any Arno? Okay, yeah.
And also for the rhythm, the writing in itself. I have absolutely no facility. It's not easy for me to write. I'm saying it at one point in the movie. Fiction writing is something I can't cope with, and there was a failure for me for many years. What I did is reading a lot every day before going in front of my screen, and trying to, I don't know, to get inhabited by the music of words of writers I particularly admire. Mm-hmm. Not in the sense that I would try to copy what they're doing, but to, like, being a sponge and taking the music of their writing. And Georges Simenon, also a French writer, was very essential to me, because it's made of really short sentences that are pretty musical. But then it's not only literature. I was thinking of slam, slam
poetry,
music, and there are some times when I get rid of verbs and it's only very fast sequences without. It's not even sentences. It's just words one after another. And that came from I'm sorry, it's always French writers. Another French writer that died when I was working on the project, who is called Hervé Prud'hon. He's not quite famous. He worked he wrote police stuff, but he has a very peculiar style. And yes, as I told you, I was reading all these books 2 hours before getting in front of the screen. And let's say I cannot stand in front of a screen for a very long time trying to write. 2 hours. 2 hours is the maximum, because I have to go back to the other screen where I'm watching movies.
Right. Can the both of you talk a bit about your process of working together? And did you have an edit before you started writing, or did you come up with the text and then you worked with the images to match the text? And I think there's an interesting relationship between image and the image and the word in this film. Sometimes the image seems to reinforce what you're saying, and sometimes it diverges. And I'm just curious about how you found that. Sometimes the connection is obvious, and sometimes it's mysterious.
I'll let you begin first. I don't know. As I told, we've edited all these shots out of the original films. I wrote the text, and then I came back, and we tried a lot of things, and of course I don't know. I didn't want the words to stick to the images or the images to the words all of the time. I wanted to. You've seen it like for the people that do not speak French with the subtitles, so it's a little bit different. But sometimes it's homophonia I was working on. Sometimes it was just like an image that is expressing the contrary of what we're saying. Sometimes it's basic irony. Sometimes it was working on forms and colors we wanted to relate together, and also we discovered that it could not always the images couldn't always differ from the text, because we'd lose the viewer. I think it was important for both of us not to lose a viewer. It's not, and I hope you didn't get it as that. It's not some masturbating exercise. And I always feel the need to address someone. If I didn't feel that need, I wouldn't work with an editor. And that's where Thomas is really important to me. Mm-hmm. Of course, I could spend like 2 years in my room and trying to put these things together. But his looks and his exigence helps the movie and me a lot. Mm-hmm. I think. I hope so. I hope.
I'm wondering if the process of working on the film, did it change your relationship to cinema at all?
That's a complicated question. It did, in the sense that since the film premiered in Berlin, I had many other duties to attend to.
So you're not watching You're not watching as many films.
So, from one day to another, it switched to being lonely in a room and watching 5 movies a day, to answering mails and answering also letters and demands from people. That takes a really long time, and I'm very glad to do it and to communicate with people and to get out of this autistic form of survival. But it's also painful, because it was for my daily life for years. So I feel some kind of need that is not fulfilled at the moment.
Right.
But as soon as I leave here, I'll go back to my room and watch other movies.
I'm going to ask one more question, and I will take a few from the audience. This is really just a question about how, I think what is striking for me about the film is the way it achieves what seems to me a very difficult balance between between many different things. It's a film about yourself. It's a film. It's a personal film, but it also manages to be a film about the world. You know, it's a film about representation, but it also tries to break. You know, it's a film that acknowledges that representation becomes a kind of reality, and then, you know, to create a reality from that. And, you know, there's this tension between you and the world. You know, and I'm the way the film narrows and opens up again, and I'm wondering if you can talk about how you worked on that, the shifting perspectives, which I think are very crucial to the power of the film.
Okay. I'm not really happy in the world I live in. I don't know about you. And I thought that attacking it, I needed to be as ruthless towards what I'm talking about, the world politics and politics in France also, and to be as ruthless towards that as towards me. And there was nothing preconceived about it. That's the way we progressed step by step. And if you feel it that way, I'm really, really glad. But it's also partly accidental. I think you don't master everything you do. I couldn't pretend I mastered anything here. I was just trying to be the most honest I could be with myself and with the work I was working on.
Okay. All right, we have time for a few questions for Frank, and we have microphones as well, so we'll start over there.
You're entering into a dialogue with the outside world, beginning with Thomas, and now coming to other audiences. It seems to me that you'll maybe be transformed by the experience of seeing the film with more and more audiences, and seeing the film as many times as possible with more audiences. But at the same time, you're still the same person you were when you began. So maybe you're not transformed by this experience, or maybe it's not transformative for you. I'm wondering what you felt about that balance, and whether you've come on a voyage with the film in its exploitation and it's being shown as much as you came on the voyage between making it and showing it to Thomas.
Okay, I wouldn't say I'm not transformed by it, because I think in a way I gained some confidence doing it. I had been working on short films for like 10 or 12 years, and when I was in society and people asked what was my job, no, I really couldn't answer I'm a filmmaker or whatever. Now I can, because it's a feature. So it changed quite a lot of things. And also the compassion, the empathy, and the love I received so far helped me to try to go farther and to work on something really different. So I'm actually now working on a new project that has, I wouldn't say absolutely nothing to do with that, but it's not a found footage movie. So I guess doing it, speaking about it with the audience, dialoguing with the people that have something in common with the movie helped me to go a step aside. I don't know if it's the good side or on the bad side, But I'm actually not the same. I still feel the same need and dependency towards movies as a spectator. But as a filmmaker, it's different, and I gained some kind of confidence, and that's a lot. Does that answer the question? No. Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. I found the technique with which the film was made quite fascinating, the mosaicing of all those films. But what I'm wondering is the overall effect on me as a viewer is to send me home as feeling as depressed and morose as the narrator. Was that your intention?
Well, my intention, as I stated before, was to be the most honest I could be towards what I have to say. I'm sorry if it's depressing, but again, in what world are we living? And also, I really thought about the end of the movie. I'm always saying it's totally autobiographical, but I kind of forced the I'm leaving part, like saying there might be some hope somewhere else. Take it or leave it. I'm not sure there is, but at least the guy from the movie, which is me, is living at the end. But yes, aren't we living in a depressing world? Am I the only one?
Yeah, you mentioned feeling like you weren't able to participate in sort of the popular protests, and I was just wondering if these acts of violence that take place, if you feel like you can do something more about that now, or maybe like by making this film, showing that you feel these ways about these events, like if that, I don't know, makes you feel more empowered. And also, I was wondering if you feel any that your mother remaining there and kind of keeping her attitude, if that there's like a symbolic kind of value in that, or if you believe that there is no symbolic value, or sort of.
What acts of violence are you referring to? Sorry.
Just the shootings and terrorist attacks.
I don't know. In France, since the end of the movie, a lot of things have changed. People have been going out in the streets now for like 22 or 23 weeks. And that is something that really changed my view on my country and on my people. That really helps me getting up in the morning. That really gives me a hope that I didn't have at that time. And these people still standing up against all the violence they are facing every Saturday. Is really something that gave me a lot of strength afterwards, and I'm thanking them for that. I'm still not that secure to go out with them. I do whatever I can to help them, and I publicly always support them. Many of my other director friends have exactly the same fear as I have, is that if we're going out, we're going to lose one eye or one hand. which are both part of the bodies we need for our work. And I think there are a lot of people out in the streets, and there are also a lot of silent people at home supporting them. And to be frank, I really feel less alone than at the time of the movie. I don't know if that answers the question.
I'm going to ask another question that maybe brings it back to cinema. Actually, two quick questions. Can you tell us about the title? I noticed in the credits there's a film called Just Don't Think I'll Cry, which is by another director named Frank from East Germany in like the 60s. I don't know the film, but obviously it's a film that was important to you.
Yeah, it was. I mentioned at one point in the movie that I downloaded like 100 or whatever movies from the Soviet and East German era. And that one actually I didn't download, I bought it. There's a DVD box set from Defiance, East German film company, that is called Verboten, and it's all about the movies that were censored by the East German government at that time. I discovered that movie in that period, and I think like all the other movies of the box set are in the movie. And no, I was just, the film is obviously really important to me, and it's a really, really good movie. But I was struck by the title, and the German title is Denk bloß nicht, ich heule. That can be translated both into don't think I'm crying, or don't think crying, or don't think I'm shouting.
Yeah.
And at the time I was watching the movie, it seemed like kind of obvious, as nobody ever heard of that movie in France, that wouldn't make a nice, an evocative title, and that it would transcript what I was actually thinking.
Right. So last question. During the screening, we were talking about calling this film a found footage film, and you said it's better to call it a stolen footage film. And then you mentioned Godard, another filmmaker who's worked with these sort of essays about cinema. And I think there's something you share in the sense that he's another filmmaker who's also using cinema to interpret and to make sense of the world. But I also feel like there's a very different sensibility at work in how you use this form. So I'm wondering if you know, how you feel about this.
Don't expect me to do any Godard bashing in front of a screen. Yeah, I think it's really different. I think Godard is not using pre-existing images of cinema in any autobiographical way, and he has been keeping this position like for the last, I don't know, for 30, 40 years, of someone that knows a lot about cinema, that has seen a lot of movies, and he's speaking, that's my viewpoint, much more as a history teacher or as a philosophy teacher, or someone that has to, his standpoint is, for me, over the audience, and he has to say something he thinks, well, like a philosopher, like cinema is, history is, war is, and I'm progressing with doubts only, and I think he's working on certitudes that might be the first and real difference between it. But I love good irony.
No, I do too. Just saying it was a different sensibility. All right, if there are no further questions, I would invite you all to join our reception, which is in the Furman Gallery. And also please come back for the next 10 days of Art of the Real. We have brochures in the lobby. I want to thank Frank and Thomas for being here tonight.
Thank you for receiving us.
Thank you.